Okay, first I've got what I think is absolutely great news. All right. Lowe's company has stepped up and agreed to be a platinum sponsor. And what they have done as a platinum sponsor has said, any student who wants to go to the Analytics Summit can register for free. All right. So that means any of you that have already registered and have put up your $50, you get your $50 back. All right. Any of you that want to go can go. Whether you want to do the student competition, which is awesome, or whether you just want to see a great list of speakers, that's awesome too. All you have to do is register. I'll send you the link tonight. I would like you, if you will go, to register by the end of the week, because we need to get a head count, because that includes breakfast, lunch, and a social in the afternoon. And I don't know what to say. I'm just, gobsmacked that they would allow that to happen, or they would do that. The student competition is still on. We have our list of judges up as well. And so there's no bad side, even if you come for half a day, there's no bad side for coming. You will be able to put that on your resume as having attended. You'll get CPE credit for it as well, which gives you a certificate. And also, like I said, you get to listen to a set of awesome speakers. There's no downside to this, okay? Other than you investing a day in your future career, if you feel that's worth it, okay? I really don't know what to say with Lowe's. I'm certainly thanking them. I have enormous gratitude for what they're doing. So it's next week on a Friday. Starts at 8 a.m. Speaking, I think, starts at 9. So please come. I mean, register, even if it's only a half a day, it will be well worth your effort. If you, any seniors here, or, okay, impending juniors or rising seniors, however you want to say it. I mean, it costs you nothing to put your resume into 2 multinational corporations and 5 rising corporations as well. So I urge you, and okay, I will still give you the 10-point bonus for on your final test. Final test, by the way, will be online. It'll be 50 questions, multiple guess. So you'll know your final grade, or that grade at the end too. So if you want to be able to turn your resume into a multinational corporation, if you'd like to compete in a competition, which you will also be able to put on your resume, or if you'd like 10 points on your final test, there's some pretty good reasons for you to go. Okay, so I will send you that email tonight, and all I can say is I praise Lowe's companies for doing this for us and for our students. Okay, so hope to see you there. A couple of other things I wanted to go to before I go on. I have 2 internship possibilities that came in late, and I would like to go ahead and give you the opportunities to do this. So Victory Junction is a children's camp for children who have special needs. So it was started with the Petty family. And of course, I'm sure most people in North Carolina have an idea who the Pettys are. It was Richard Petty's grandson during a NASCAR race at the age of 19. He died in a horrible accident. And to dedicate to him, the Petty family has started 2 camps for children with special needs, one in Florida and one in North Carolina. It's year round. They invite 160 children at a time. Each individual child is given their own camp counselor to help them. They have a staff of 30 to 40 doctors that work full time with them, so that when the students go home, they carry with them lifelong things to help them for the rest of their lives. It is an enormously good thing. I've been to the camp myself and seen it. And they don't need camp counselors, although I'm sure they do if you would like to do that. But they also need someone to work with their social media. And so that's the first thing about it. It's about a 3-hour drive. Yeah.
Do it typically offer this each year, because that's actually.
Yes. Every year. Yeah. Well, let me just say this is the second year in a row that they've offered it to us. And I'm just 100% in favor of them. The student who did it last year, it was a rewarding experience for them, one that they will never forget. I mean, it's you are in a transformative place. You know, you're given a chance, these kids who are given a rare opportunity at this camp, there's nothing that they don't allow them to do. They have the ability to swing on ropes. They have the ability to drive cars. They have the ability to go over anything and everything that their hearts desires. And that's one of the wonderful things about the camp. And occasionally they say Richard Petty shows up every once in a while because it's on Petty land, okay? So that's another benefit of it. There's no bad, folks, no bad in this whatsoever. Pardon me?
There's not many houses.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's reasonable, yeah. So anyway, you're right. So anyway, this is more than just an internship. It's a very special thing as well. And we provided them with interns and they're coming back. And so for those of you who wish to apply, they have the link online, okay? And I will forward you this link if you want to email me. Second is Mac Speed Shop in Charlotte is looking for someone to help them with their digital marketing campaign as well. And so right now they're looking for 1 intern. They may need 2. I don't necessarily know as well. For those of you who are in Charlotte, I'm not exactly sure if this requires you to relocate or not. I haven't gotten into those particulars, but they come into the game. They're looking for interns, and I told them that I would pass this along as well. So for those of you who are at that, you know, we're late in the game right now, but there's always chances if you're still looking for that, I have this as well. Okay. Okay, so lots of good things happen. All right. Yes.
So you said the final was online. Are we gonna take it in here?
No. You will take it wherever you wish.
Okay.
All right. Do not require you to stay here or come here. You can take it at your home. Be warned, IP addresses are recorded. So if I see 2 IPSs in the same class C, I kind of got an idea. Yeah.
Will it be for the 2.5 hour time slot, or like for the whole day?
I'm gonna only do it during the 2.5 hour time slot. Now, I have 3 time slots. So I will allow you to take it any of those 3 times, okay? Because we're just required to, all right? They make us do it during those times, okay? Okay, so let us move on. All right. In 1992 to 94, Walmart initiated what they called their vendor management system, their VMS. One of the things that Walmart required was in order for you to be a vendor with Walmart, it required you to do certain things. Walmart required you to invest in computer equipment worth thousands of dollars. It also required you to have some dial-up access, usually either through Telnet or CompuServe or AOL. And of course, they started loosening that up to have a general internet connection, VidTex, excuse me, that was the other. The internet was just in its beginnings in 92. The government pulled the plug on funding in 1992, which meant that individual companies could invest in the internet. And that's really where the internet exploded, all right, is when private investment was able to get in. So what happened is the organizations that had to invest this enormous capital, that was required of them to stay vendors of Walmart. But Walmart said, but you get this. Walmart said that you would be able to look at every single good you have in every single shelf, in every single Walmart all over the world. And that was what the vendor management system did. This is an example of the proper and valuable use of power when power needs to be applied. It brought success. It has been copied many times over by many more organizations, but it all started with Walmart exerting this power over these organizations to get them to change. And so what is power? What do we discuss as power? Well, power has been around for many years. This is one of the books I very much urge you to buy. I think you can find this book for $10 on Amazon. This is the 7th edition. They go to the 10th or the 11th edition now. But all of the essential, write-ups on it, come from this book. And this is a book on leadership. I wish I would have had this as my first class as an undergraduate, because it would have helped a lot of the difficulties I went through with life, trying to understand leadership and how leaders are supposed to act. It would have just made life a lot easier for me. But one of the things they have in here is a chapter on power and what power and how to successfully use it. And so I urge you to get this book. This is another book I'll talk about again, Influence by Cialdini. And this book talks about the ways that we can respectfully influence others, and especially with the way that we can draft our wishes in ways that we can have our wishes understood by others. And that may ultimately be the most important thing out of this particular book. Sure. Leadership in Organizations. Okay, by Gary Ugal. I've heard it pronounced Ugal. I believe he's out of New York State. He's been a writer on leadership and power for generations. And this is a book on influence, science, and practice by Robert Cialdini. And this is not a textbook, but it's an excellent book on the positive and negative aspects of influence as well. So they give you both sides of it. And so what is power? Power, by its very definition, power permeates through all marketing channels. There are many varied sources of power, and power is not equivalent. Influencing is not power. Power is the potential to influence. Influence is altering what would have been the course of events. The difficulty with power, as we talk about it, is it's very difficult sometimes to understand power in its essence But there are 5 ways that we can have an inventory of different types of power. And then understanding dependence, which is the reciprocal factor of power as well. And so when Walmart used their power to create the vendor management system, I think it's quite telling that Walmart didn't call it the Walmart management system. They called it the vendor management system. Kind of speaks a little bit to ultimately what Walmart was trying to do. And it also spoke to the best overall solutions for their particular issues. And so what is power? Power is the ability for one channel member A to get another channel member B to do things that they ordinarily may not have done. It is the potential for influence, but it isn't necessarily the ability. One of the difficulties with power is that it's very difficult to diagnose because many times you have what's called a false positive. So what is a false positive? It's when events would occur in the direction you want, but you're not the protagonist, the one that made it actually change. And so my example is this. I am A, the manufacturer, and I am trying to get the retailer B to lower their prices. Retailer B lowers their prices. But perhaps retailer B is being influenced by the fact that the prices for those goods are generally lower in that geographic area. And that retailer B is lowering their prices to remain competitive. That is a possibility. And so many times it is speculative. It may be impossible to verify. But yes, again, it does exist. All right. And so that is one of the difficulties. Now, before I go on, I want to ask or answer the question, is power good or bad? And that is an important consideration. And so I have this pencil. Is this pencil good or bad?
It's good.
And the reason why?
It solves the issue. I mean, it does what you need to do.
Right. And I think that's a very correct way of stating it. I also could be signing out some poor student who could not get into school, and I'm the one taking them out. That is also true as well. It's important to understand. I used to carry a hammer, but I decided that was too threatening to carry it anyway. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the value of it is value neutral, power in and of itself. The use of power comes down to the individual and the decisions that they're making in its use. And so when I say whether power is good or bad, let me give you, in the instance of power, when power could be considered good and when power could be considered bad. The first way to think of power when it's bad is when it maximizes one member's profit, sometimes at the expense of others. And that's when it's good for a single member. Walmart in their wisdom, and I'll call it wisdom, had a good exercise of power because they did it for the benefit of the entire system. Walmart, yes, it was to their advantage. There's no doubt about it. But it was also to the benefit of the vendors as well. Even though they had to pony out thousands of dollars, just look on the other side, how many millions of dollars Walmart had to spend on their own vendor management system. I forgot the number, but Walmart has spent in the billions over years investing in their IT department. I think their computer systems is second only to the United States military in terms of size and depth. But the benefits were for all, not for one member. And so it can be good for the system, it can be good for a single member, but its greatest good, if you want to call it that, is when all benefit from the system. It doesn't mean there aren't costs. There are costs everybody has to pay. But the correct and useful use of power is when power is used for the benefit of everyone. And that also means that you can't trade off members. There has to be a way for benefits for everyone. And so remember, its usage can be good or bad. Power is, however, value neutral. So if I were to look in this book and I were to look up power in influence, one of the things that I would be looking for is I would be looking for the outcomes that the power had. So French and Raven in 1959 are actually the first individuals who came up with this grouping of power. And so power in the 80s and 90s, every research article that you would find had something to do with power. And then at about 1993, the Journal of Channel Distribution said, we're up to here with power, you can't produce anything else, we're done, all right? So power is basically what we consider 5 unique, different modules. Their outcomes usually do either one of 3 things. They will commitment, you don't have to know this for the test. This is, they either drive commitment, they drive compliance, because you got to, or they'll generate resistance. And it is all in the successful use of power that ultimately defines whether you did it right or not. And so let us start talking about these 5. And of course, these is your quick look at them. And then we're going to break these down one at a time. So the first is reward power. Reward power is a benefit that is given for the return of a channel member's agreement to alter their behavior. If I go to my daughter and I say, if you finish your homework before 7, you can have a cookie. Go on the dark side, they have cookies. All right. That is an example of a benefit. Generally, the benefits are focused mainly on financial rewards when we're talking about distribution channels. However, non-financial reward systems are valued as well. So our speaker list, an incredible list of individuals, they're coming to do this pro bono. In other words, just to come to Appalachian State University and speak to you, they are not accepting any fees. That's incredible, all right? So I can't give them financial rewards, and so I'm going to give them non-financial rewards. I'm going to do things to let them know I feel valued. I'm gonna have one GA whose sole job is to take care of our speakers. So anything they need, they'll be able to do for them. I procured a separate room in Clemens so that they can sit and work and do other things while they're not speaking. I have made sure that the GA who drives them knows when they're coming so that they can help them with their bags. I'm going to have this filmed so that they can have a copy of this. And I'm doing everything I can in terms of rewarding them that I can't, that in other words, I can't give them in any other way. And actually in major, and you'll understand this as well, many times non-financial benefits are actually more accepting and more rewarding than the financial ones as well, all right? So you can do this in many different ways and in many different forms. We can also, through rewards and gratitude, the downstream members can be just as valuable as the upstream members can be, all right? One of the difficulties, however, with with reward power is if I tell my daughter before 7 that if she finishes before 7 o'clock, she can have a cookie, what is she going to ask for tomorrow? And yes, okay, exactly. That's the difficulty with the reward system, is that the reward system becomes almost trapped in itself. Yeah, I can use a glass of milk now too. But yeah, now we're gonna do it. Anyway, use it. But that's the problem with the reward systems when it's used. I wouldn't say irresponsibly, but irrespective of thinking about it. The whole difficulty with sales promotion. Sales promotions were originally created so that to try to get you to change the brands that you enjoy to something else. And so, promotions and discounts, when you're looking at advertising, usually they're for a limited time, they're for a reduced amount to spur someone towards a decision. Well, the problem with sales promotions is they become, counterproductive. For one thing, companies will not move, consumers won't change their brand perceptions and won't move. We know that in the long run. And also what happens is it becomes an expectation. I can't think of a pizza I bought in the last 30 years without checking for a special first. So that's kind of a difficulty that you have with rewards, okay? So that's reward power. The next is coercive power. The coercive power comes from the expectation that B will be punished by A if you fail to conform with A's influence attempt. And while they say this represents the flip side of reward power, no, it's more than that, okay? Because a punishment power is just like, dissatisfaction, okay? Satisfaction used to be what we considered a measuring stick when it came to consumer acceptance. Satisfaction, the difficulty with that is that satisfaction is kind of a passive emotion. It's like, no, I'm satisfied. It's okay. All right. Dissatisfaction, however, is not the flip side. It's a call to action. When I'm dissatisfied with something, it spurs me to take some kind of action against it. It's a call to action. Well, that's very much the thing, the difficulty with coercive power is that it is synonymous with threatening another individual or another organization. Individuals can be very hurt and very concerned with that. And it is amazing sometimes that the users of coercive action are surprised and shocked. by the intensity of the reaction by the target. No kidding, you're threatening me. How am I supposed to react? Okay, no. People respond to threats usually with aggression, which is one of the reasons why you got to think first sometimes, but it will usually respond retaliation. Remember this, it's not the absence of a reward, but it is viewed on as an attack on your business and yourself. Coercion should only be used as a last resort. The next is expert power. Okay. Expert power. Expert is the perception that the influencer has special knowledge or expertise. And boy, do our speakers have knowledge or expertise. These are individuals that are on the cutting edge. Now, what does that mean, expert power? Well, actually, we devote or we consider expert power to actually be two unique functions. And one of these is expertise, which is the making of good choices or good judgments. Usually these good judgments are done over a history. There are those individuals who can look at things, make logical deductions, and come up with correct answers. And we marvel at their ability to make right choices. That is a unique quality. And let me also say that it's a unique quality that ChatGPT just doesn't have, all right? One of the things I think that separates us from AI now, and I really believe this in the future, because I've talked to this in my college. I believe one of the important things that makes human beings human is our own self-doubt. And I think the ability to question ourselves, whether or not we are correct or not, is a unique human characteristic that I haven't seen in any formula when it comes to artificial intelligence. This is my own personal thoughts, okay? There were two times during the Cold War when we actually may have been launching nuclear weapons. One of them was during the Cuban crisis, and another was during the 80s. One time it was stopped by an American, and the other time it was stopped by a Russian soldier. Both times they were given signals that said it's time to launch, and both of those soldiers withheld. They had doubts. And it's those doubts, I think, that separate us. And so this is what I consider to be expertise. I think there's some human instinct that is valuable and needs to be preserved. So you have expertise, but then you have information sources, and this is your provision of data, whether it's highly specialized or unique, but you are considered to be someone, as the old saying goes, with the dirt under your fingernails. You understand intimately your particular knowledge source. Now, it's not easy to use. The channel member has to be trusted. Usually they're given a very high status, but the difficult also thing is, it's difficulty to be used because many times entrepreneurial individuals don't like to be told what to do. And so you have to use influence strategies to be able to put your ideas across. The other part that's difficult, of course, is that if you tend to be expressive and you give away a lot of your knowledge, it can disappear in a moment. And so I used to be, when I was at the Omni Computer Store, well, Radio Shack 2 in Lafayette when I was in my twenties. I had this gift of gab, for lack of a better word, in that I tend to say more than I should. And so I would have customers come in, we would talk about general knowledge about computers, and I would spend time investing on reading magazines and staying ahead. And just as soon as I would finish, they'd go out the door and buy it somewhere else. And so those are the difficulties with what you have. So how do you protect yourself? Okay. Protect yourself. If you consider yourself an expert. One, give out only specialized knowledge. I would say even idiosyncratic knowledge, knowledge that is not easily transferred from one to the next. I would also continually invest in learning. Always stay ahead. So the brand mantra for the Analytics Summit is to get above the curve. And for those there, the speakers are just as interested in hearing the other speakers because they want to stay above the curve. And so for those of you who come, you're going to be presented specialized knowledge that isn't easily obtained anywhere else. That's why the certificate is so valuable. That's why just showing up is so valuable, because anyone who looks at your resume and sees that you've been at the summit says this individual has some unique specialized knowledge, and they were driven enough to go to that to be able to try to expand their horizons. And that's why it's so valuable. The other is we transmit customized information. To what the question is, and then use only transaction based knowledge. In other words, don't sell the farm. One of my sales managers said, you got to get to the point where they're asking you something special, and you have to ask them, if I give you this, are you ready to go, and let's sign this up and get it done. It was very difficult. I was not very good at closing, I'll say that. I tended to stretch it out. The key thing, by the way, in selling, you ask for the order. It's amazing how many times, especially when you first start selling, you gotta just ask for the order, okay? So, expert power. Legitimate power. Legitimate power goes two ways. One is known as legal legitimate, and the other is known as traditional legitimate. Okay. Legitimate power is based on the target's perception, that it is some way obligated to comply with the request of the influencer. There are two sources of legitimate power. The first one is legal legitimate, and it's this one here. Legal legitimate power is conferred by governments stemming from those nations' laws on contracts and commerce. You make an invoice The invoice is in essence, if you don't know, a contract. Says that upon delivery, there needs to be payment in one way or another. But that is legal legitimate power. And the major source of legal legitimate is in the contracts that channel members sign. The next is traditional legitimate power. And that is what exists in a handshake deal. All right. If I go to you and say, I'll do whatever I can to help you, and I shake your hand, the only thing that binds us together are the norms between us that make me feel obligated to fulfill my promise. This is a norm. A norm, by definition, is an expected way of behavior.
You like the verbal contract,
Yes,
isn't that legally binding though, the verbal contract?
who was it who said, Sam Goldwyn said, a verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. Okay. What it basically means is this, is there can always be interpretations. Okay. If you leave something to interpret it to be interpreted in contract terms, they call that being uncovered. Okay. In other words, there's no words that bind you to that. Now, yes, you might be obligated in one way or another, but that's up for the courts to decide. Okay, and that's what we call a verbal contract. Okay. And then you're left up to a judge or to a panel of juries, and you never know which way that's going to sway. It's different. Okay. So norms, values, and beliefs. To give you an idea, I have an example of what I went through and an example of traditional, legal, legitimate, and coercive power and how they all mix together. So I started internet service providership in 1999. There were about 5,000 independent ISPs out there at one time. We were doing small cities. We were buying 2.1s and using servers to be able to split the dial-up connections up. I used Windows NT, quite frankly, because nobody else was using it. And at that time, Unix machines were getting hammered through their Perl scripting. So I decided I didn't want to do that. So anyway, I started the business. I got up to about 1,900 customers. We were starting to transition in 2003 to high-speed internet using DSL connections and DSLAMs and stuff like that. And then Walmart came along in 2004 with $4.95 dial-up internet, and that did me in. All right. I went from 1,900 customers to 1,200 in the space of 6 months. I was bleeding subscribers, and I went to South Central Bell, who was one of the baby bells at the time, and I said, we've got to rewrite these contracts or I'm going to go out of business. And all that they said was basically, you signed this contract, you've got to pay us for it. And I said, you don't understand, I'm going out of business. I have no other recourse. If I don't get some kind of negotiation, you're going to end up with nothing. And they were saying, you have a bill of $120,000, pay up, we'll take you home. They went into that level. They were calling me, emailing me, everything that you might consider. And I was at a very bad point in my life at around 2004, 2005. And so in desperation, I went to go see my attorney. So my attorney, bless you, his name was Forrest Danton. Forrest's dad actually ran for governor of Mississippi. He was a lawyer in Columbia, in Mississippi. He was also a city circuit judge, which meant that he could not try cases inside of Columbia, but he could be a lawyer in other aspects. So I gave him free internet. He gave me free legal advice, drew up all my contracts for the LSC, and I literally bled to him, telling him about my situation and where I was. And it was a pretty bad point in my life. And I asked for his advice, and Forrest said, F him. And I went, excuse me. So Forrest was a deacon in his church. I had never heard Forrest use a curse word in his life. He did it for a reason. He wanted to shake me up. He wanted to get me out of where I was. And I blinked a couple of times and said, what do you mean, Forrest? He said, David, I drew up your contracts. You owe nothing in the corporation. You're a managing partner. You have no connections whatsoever to your company. So close your business, sell your subscriber base, go do something else, and they'll never touch you. And I left that with my soul restored, and he was absolutely right. They chased me with a bill for $120,000 for a couple of years. I sold my subscriber base. I went on to get my MBA and my PhD, and that's why I'm here. All right. And that's to give you an idea of the differences between legal legitimate and traditional legitimate power. They were using coercive power to try to get me to do these things. They were using traditional legitimate power, my desire to live up to the expectations of societal norms. But the truth is, legally, they had nothing to stand on. All right. Now, if I'd have tried to stay in business, they could have done something. But I got out, I was free. Amen. And so that's an example of legitimate power and its proper use. And the moral of the story is South Central Bell went out of business, and I hope every one of them did too. They were bought by AT&T, and so now I hope they're selling apples in Jackson, Mississippi. Excuse me. Sorry. I have no, sweet regret. Anyway. The last is referent power. Referent power is the other reason why I want y'all to go to the analytics summit. The referent power is where B views A as a standard of reference and wish to be identified publicly with A. Every one of your recruiters who looked at your resume and says that you were sitting there listening to these speakers are going to say, wow, that was pretty cool. They went for that. They listened to some very important speakers. Its existence is undeniable. We want to be around influencers. We desire to be around them. We want people to know that we are part of them. When I go out and say my name is David Shouse, it means nothing. But if it says I'm an associate professor at the Walker College of Business at Appalachian State, that means something. And that's the other thing that we're trying to work hard for is that sheepskin that you get at the end of this journey that you're going through school, that the referent power of your diploma is going to open doors for you. That's an important thing we're trying to do. Okay. So to try to wrap some of these things up, I want to also say there's a couple of things here that the book that Euclid writes that talks about reward power, coercive power, and traditional power are what are known as, legal legitimate, my apologies, are what are known as position power. These are powers that are granted by a hierarchical structure that are given to you just for being in the location where you're at. I have the ability to give rewards and punishments being where I am. By the very same notion, legal legitimate, because by contract, I have that. I have a position of strength. However, reference power, traditional power, and expert power, are what are known as personal power. These are conveyed in individuals. Personal power, reference power, traditional, legitimate, and expert are personal powers. Individuals are given these strengths. And that is also what is important about them. There is another way to look at them, coercive power and non-coercive power. So there's really only one coercive power, and that is, of course, coercive itself. So my daughter turned 11. I got her a cell phone. I haven't seen her for a couple of weeks. She's there. But one of the things that I want her to understand is that she needs to maintain a certain level, even in the point of distraction. She's really distracted. Okay. So I don't want to approach this in a coercive way because that's an erosion of trust. And so I've told her, as long as your grades are good, that you're doing the chores that we have set up for you so that you can earn your allowances, I have no problem whatsoever. All right. The expectation is that you're now 11, you have responsibilities now, and you understand them. And I said, if things change, we'll have to revisit them. That is the use of a reference power as opposed to using a coercive power. All right. I want her to understand that I appreciate where she is. And another thing about it is it's a negotiation, and you negotiate with equals. And I want my daughter to know that I respect her opinion, and I want her to consider herself an equal with me. But the expectation is that to become an adult, you have to accept the responsibilities of one as well. It's a hard lesson. All right. So one that even I'm still trying to figure out. Okay. The next or the last is mediated power versus unmediated. And mediated is when the target is forced to acknowledge these power bases because I have no choice. You could almost look about them as position power. Unmediated are those that would not exist without my own personal perception. Expert, referent, and traditional legitimate powers only exist because I accept them as being powers to me. If I don't accept that those are norms or the expectations of norms, they have no power over me whatsoever. And so this is the difference between mediated and unmediated. So the last thing I want to say is there is one great power that you should understand in influencing. And one of the ways in which you can practice influencing is a surprising way. Just ask. Right? Cialdini talks about this experiment they did with people at a copy machine. And there was somebody at the copier, and someone would come in and say, "Excuse me, may I make some copies?" And they would ask, "Well, why for?" If they asked at all, and they said, "Well, I need to make copies." 90% of the individuals allowed someone else to go in front of them to use the copier. Sometimes influence is just about asking. And then also after asking, showing gratitude. Those are the two key things, all right? Asking for help and finding gratitude when the help is given. Okay. All right, we're done. Have a great week. I will send you the links. Have a great afternoon. It's beautiful out there.
All right, guys. Have a good night. You too. See, I'm not gonna turn out here. One of those days. Yeah, I feel you.
You bet. Thank
We
you.
just professional to the analytics.